Canada falling behind the global economic race, with the US outpacing us by nearly $20,000 in GDP per capita. The gap between our two nations is widening at a rate we haven't seen in decades. Today we're diving into why Canada's economy is slipping and what needs to happen to turn things around. Spoiler alert, it's going to take some big changes and some fast work. It's a big day for the Liberal Party of Canada, as Mark Carney, a familiar face in the global economics, takes on the new role. Carney, who served as the governor of the Bank of Canada as well as the Bank of England, is stepping in as special advisory to the leader of the Liberal Party, who is also Canada's Prime Minister. This move has generated plenty of buzz, especially given the significant economic challenges Canada faces today. Carney isn't walking into an easy task. Canada's economy has been sliding compared to its neighbor, the United States, and the gap between the two economies is becoming real concern for experts, policymakers, and everyday Canadians. To give you an idea of just how stark the difference is, consider this: in 2023, the United States reported a GDP per capita at almost $65,000, while Canada's GDP per capita sat just over $45,500. That's a massive gap, nearly $20,000 per person. It's not just a number, it represents the difference between a living standard and availability of public services and overall health of the economy. So the big question everyone is asking is, how did Canada fall so far behind the US? And what went wrong? One of the people trying to answer this question is Trevor Tomby, an economics professor at the University of Calgary. Professor Tomby has been researching this issue for a while, and according to him, there's no simple answer. If they were, it would be a lot easier to fix. Instead, the gap between US and Canadian economies is a result of combination factors. Canada's economy is large, complex, and like any large system, it's affected a range of external and internal pressures. One of the biggest hits in Canada's economy came back in 2015 and 2016, when commodity prices, particularly oil, took a significant nosedive. As a country that relies heavily on natural resources, this was a major blow. Energy is a huge part of Canada's economic engine, and when oil prices fell, the ripple effects were felt across the entire economy. It wasn't just about job losses in the energy sector, it affected investment, government revenues, and consumer confidence. But that wasn't the only problem. Over the past decade, Canada has also faced significant policy uncertainty. This uncertainty has come from multiple directions, both domestically and internationally. At home, there's been debate and confusion over major issues like taxation, environmental policies, and energy regulations. These policy debates have created a lot of uncertainty for businesses and investors who are hesitated to commit money to projects when they're not sure what the rules will look like in a few years down the road. Then there's the issue of Canada's trading relationship with the United States. As Canada's largest trading partner, any instability in this relationship can have serious consequences for the economy. And as we've seen in recent years, the trade relationship between Canada and the US has had its fair shake of rocky moments, from tariff disputes to disagreements over cross-border pipelines. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like these tensions will disappear anytime soon, which means more uncertainty for Canadian businesses as well as consumers alike. The gap between Canada and the US isn't just a short-term issue either. It's been growing steadily, and it's reached levels that we haven't seen in generations. That's why people like Professor Tomby are sounding the alarm. The longer this gap continues to grow, the harder it will be able to close it, and the more Canada risks falling behind on global stage. But this raises another important question. Is the US just doing something incredibly well, or is Canada doing something particularly wrong? The answer, according to Professor Tomby, is that a little bit of both. One of the key areas where Canada has been lagging behind is labor productivity. For those who might not be familiar with the term labor productivity, essentially refers to how efficiently workers are able to produce goods and services. When labor productivity is high, it means workers are producing more with the same amount of time and effort. Unfortunately, recent data shows that Canada has not only seen slow growth in labor productivity, but in many sectors, there's been an outright reduction in productivity. Historically, about 90% of the labor productivity growth in Canada has come from business investment. This means that when businesses invest in new technologies, equipment, and training for their workers, It leads to higher productivity, but that's where Canada has fallen behind. Business investment in Canada has been lagging, and that has had a direct impact on productivity growth. Without the right investments, it's difficult for workers to produce more, and overall economy suffers as a result. Now, this is where Mark Carney's expertise becomes crucial. His role as a special advisor to help guide the Liberal leader and by extension the Canadian government on how to address these issues. He'll be tasked with providing solutions on how to boost productivity and get the economy back on track. And according to Professor Toomby, if Canada had managed to keep pace with the US over the last 2 years, the Canadian economy would be 8.5% larger today. That translates to about an additional $6,200 in income for every Canadian. Let that sink in for a moment. That's a kind of impact productivity growth or lack thereof can have on people's lives. It's not just abstract number, it's a real money that could have gone into Canadians' pockets. It's even realistic for Canada to try match the US economy. After all, US has been able to grow its economy by running up significant levels of debt. There's essentially no cap on their debt levels, and while that helped fuel economic growth in the short term, it's not a sustainable strategy in the long run. Canada, on the other hand, has been cautious with its fiscal policy. While that has been kept in countries' debt levels more manageable, it also means Canada hasn't been able to grow as quickly as the US. So while matching the US in terms of economic growth might be not feasible or even advisable, Canada could at least aim to keep pace with other advanced economies. So what can Canada do to close the gap? According to Professor Toomby, there are a few key areas that need attention. One of the most important is business incentives. It is not just about cutting taxes, although that can certainly help. What Canada really needs is more competitive business environment. In many sectors, there are only a few big players. When there's a limit in competition, businesses don't have the same incentive to invest in new technologies or improve efficiency. Because there's no pressure to stay ahead of the competition, as a result, productivity stagnates and the economy as a whole suffers. Another major issue is Canada's internal trade barriers. It might come as a surprise to many, but even within Canada, it can be incredibly difficult for businesses to trade goods and services across provincial lines. Each province has its own set of regulations and standards, and navigating these rules can be both costly and time-consuming. This lack of interprovincial trade freedom creates inefficiencies and makes it harder for businesses to grow and compete on a national level or even international scale. If Canada could break down some of these barriers, it would open up new opportunities for businesses and improve overall economic performance. At the end of the day, if the Prime Minister were to ask Professor Toomby for advice, he'd likely recommend starting with these two areas: improving competition in the key sectors and pushing provincial governments to remove barriers to interprovincial trade. These are not easy tasks by any means, but they're essential if Canada is going to turn the economic situation around. In fact, Professor Toomby has suggested it might even be worth launching a royal commission to study these issues in more depth. The Royal Commission could bring together experts from various fields to examine where Canada is falling short and develop a national strategy for addressing these challenges. This is where Mark Carney's whole role as a special advisor could prove invaluable. Carney has a wealth of experience from his time as the head of two of the world's most important central banks. He understands how to navigate complex economic situations and has proven track record for guiding countries through financial turbulence. But his role won't be an easy one. The solution Canada needs are deep and structural, and they will require cooperation across multiple levels of government as well as the private sector. The road to economic recovery won't be a quick or simple one, but with Carney's guidance, there's hope that Canada can start moving in the right direction. As Canada moves forward, it's clear that business as usual won't be enough. The country needs bold reforms to boost productivity, encouragement, investment, and break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. The stakes are high, and decisions made in the coming years will have a lasting impact on Canada's economic future. Mark Carney's advice to the Prime Minister and the Liberal Party could shape the direction of the country for years to come, but it's going to require difficult choices and willingness to embrace change. In conclusion, the gap between Canada and the US is not just a temporary blip. It's a long-term trend that has been growing for years, and it's only getting worse. Canada has a lot of work to do if they want to remain competitive in the global economy. The key challenges are clear: improve productivity and boost businesses' investment and remove the barriers to international trade. Whether through policy changes, regulatory reform, or new incentives for businesses, Canada needs to act, and it will need to act now with Mark Carney's experience and expertise. There is hope that Canada can rise to the challenge, but it won't happen overnight, and it won't be easy. If you found this breakdown of Canada's economic challenges insightful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more in-depth discussion on key issues shaping our country's future. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think Canada needs to do to boost its economy? Drop a comment below and let's keep the conversation going.